Whatever. Yeah, me too. Oh, this is going with it. That's ridiculous. Don't worry, I don't care. Main thing to say that it's not. If you have this numbers, that was that. I've never yet pressed. I really did it. I've never used it. No. Hi everybody, hopefully you're here to join the exciting transport working group. If you're here, would you like to think about whether you want to take notes? Or maybe your particular delight would be to take some Java for us? We're going to need a note taker and a Java scribe to continue. Okay, the note for the session will be Fred Baker. Can you see Fred? Where is Fred? Martin Streamerling will be monitoring Java. So if you're a remote participant, note that Martin can relay questions. We've also got a big red button here that can allow remote participants to come on the video if they really want to. And we have a Tsvwg meeting. I'm sharing this with Martin. You all know Martin. Say hello, Martin. Hello. David's not here. Okay, note well. If you haven't read this, now is your time to take note of the IETF's IPR policy. Before you contribute to this meeting in any way, you need to agree to the IPR procedure. We now have a note taker and a Java scribe. We're always looking for reviewers for Tsvwg drafts, and we'll be calling some of these drafts out as we go through the meeting today. If you're thinking about authoring something that you would like the working group to look at, please include Tsvwg in the name of the internet draft you submit. And we're still looking for a working group co-chair to join us, or maybe a secretary to help us. If you think you could do these, please let us know. Let's go through the agenda. The agenda for today is the first of two. We're bashing the agenda right now. We're going to go through document, status, charter and accomplishments. We've had a number of drafts progressing through the working group, and we'll talk a little bit about these. We'll then review our charter milestones. We're going to be taking today the drafts relating to SCTP and the diffserv and signaling related drafts, which is the diffserv interconnection classes. If you're not on this agenda, you might be on Thursday's. Thursday's agenda looks like this. We're going to look at ECN encapsulation. Bob's going to send me slides, aren't you, Bob? Yep. And tunnel congestion feedback, we want a presentation for. And then we're going to look at diffserv and IEEE 802.11. And Bob again on identifying modified ECN semantics. And if time permits, we might take the ABE draft that has been discussed a few IETFs ago in ICCRG as a heads-up presentation. Has anybody got anything else that they think should be on the agenda or they would like to talk to the chairs about? Any agenda changes? No, the agenda's bashed. We go with this agenda. So this is a session where we have still no RFCs published, but we've been busy in the background. There's 3 IDs now in RFC Editor Q. The DTLS encapsule for SCTP. It's been there for a while. It's waiting for a document which we called NData or iData. This document will be presented later in the working group today. Once that's with the RFC editor, the encaps for SCTP can proceed. We have a NAT behavioral requirements update. This is now with the RFC editor, and an SCTP path failover, which is currently being discussed with the RFC editor and Authors 48 to finalize that so it can enter the RFC editor queue. So, as a working group, we're doing quite well. We've pushed several things into the RFC editor queue. Next IETF will be able to report them being published. We have one ID post IESG approval. That's the Network Transport Circuit Breaker. The revised ID should reach RFC editor queue by the end of the week. We'll talk a little bit about that in this meeting, but the hard work for that's already been done. We have the diffserv and WebRTC QoS draft is in last call. And so also is the GRE in UDP draft currently. So
The DiffServ and WebRTC draft is in IETF last call. The GRE and UDP is in working group last call. That we'll talk about again later in the meeting. One ID has been passed to the IESG. That's the UDP usage guidelines. It's been submitted for publication as a BCP. We'll do a short update on what changed since the working group last call. And now for your action. 2 IDs are likely to go to working group last call soon. The DiffServ interconnection classes and practice, and the SCTP iData chunk, which is called NData in the draft. These 2 we expect to have working group last call before the next meeting. There's 3 working group documents currently being edited: ECN encapsulation guidelines, SCTP NAT support, and the tunnel congestion feedback. Several drafts are being discussed on the list, or should be discussed. Please use the TSVWG mailing list to discuss these drafts. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but please use the mailing list to discuss these. One of the drafts will be talked about for adoption later in the meeting. That's the end of our status update. Anybody got any questions? That's a good thing about giving a status update that says lots of things have been done. Right, I'll talk about network circuit breakers for a moment. I was the author of this document and became the editor as it became a working group document. The shepherd for this is David. The draft has now been approved by the IESG. When the slides were made, version 14 incorporated the IESG comments. If you've been following this draft, it's useful, I think, just to give a quick heads up that there were several changes to the structure of the document, as well as small changes to the content of the document. And because the structural changes creates lots of diffs, I'll just outline those along with the major change that occurred in section 4, requirement 1. This had a must in, which during the IESG discussion became obvious to us that really this must was only remaining due to an editorial problem, and that the intention here was to describe the way in which the circuit breaker control channel should operate in what was then requirement 16, which uses the language of should use these and describes the places where control feedback needs to be provided in a way that cuts the circuit breaker or triggers it. This change has been incorporated. It was sent to the list by David, and we got no comments to say that we're actually making a mistake in implementing this change. And in fact, Bob's coming tonight. Bob had already commented on this, and we had amended the language in requirement 16. We just failed to notice the language in requirement 1 contradicted then requirement 16.
Bob Briscoe. Yeah, I hadn't looked at that text. I'm not sure that English, when it fails to receive measurement reports that indicate an absence of congestion, if it's failing to receive them, how did it know that they indicated an absence of congestion? Or
is that blue text or red text?
Blue. Top of the first sentence of the blue text. How can it fail to receive something that contains something? How does it know it contains something?
Okay, I'm not taking that one online, but I will talk to my area director and we'll get that fixed if that's an English problem. There's the incredibly complicated mapping between which requirements were which in the working group last call version of the document and the final document. I'm not going through this, but you read it on the slide deck if you want to look at it. The next steps are to incorporate all the comments we've received. There was none from the list, there's now Bob's, which we will fix. And Spencer's already reviewed all the other ones, and we're happy with the other changes. So it's going to be submitted. Okay, that one through. Any questions on that apart from noting what we did? It's becoming a monologue here.
Yeah.
Okay. UDP usage guidelines. Current status. We did a working group last call, version 6. Documents now progressed in a number of small steps towards something which has completed the Shepherd review by David Black. All current edits have been incorporated, and we submitted this to our AD. So this one will now go to IETF, last call after the AD review. Okay, should never publish this many documents all in one, right? GRE and UDP encapsulation. You like to talk to it? Yeah, it'll be good, because that would save me talking to everything. have a mic. Yeah. GRE in UDP encapsulation has been in working group last call. That working group last call period has finished, but we haven't closed the working group last call. So give us a quick update.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just quick update. As Gaurav said, this finished the working group last call. In this, since Yokohama, we have the 3 update version to this last one, which is version 11. During this 3 update, we really thank you. David and Gaurav both gave us a lot of the technical comment and also the editorial comment. So we had quite a amount of change. I can change. Among those changes, here to summarize, this is a term change, try to align with this the 5405 bits. And also we have some the structure change to make the document flow is better to read. And we also have some technical change that's making that protocol design acceptable or precise based on the David and Gaura's the comments suggestion. And we also have quite amount of editorial change to improve the readability. So that's why I think this version 11 is really the good to read, and I encourage the folks to read. Although we passed the working group last call, as chair, I want to encourage some people to read and give some comment if you have any. That's it.
So does anybody have any comments on this draft that they'd like to bring now? If you like, please go to the mic. Okay, so no additional comments. We do need review comments for this document for it to complete its working group last call. Would anyone here like to volunteer to review this document?
Please.
So do you have, you said on the mail that you found somebody who was willing to review? Lucy? Did you say you'd found somebody who was offering a review?
Yeah. Actually, Donald. He accepted my request to review. I thought Bob is here. Maybe Bob. I don't see him.
Okay, so I also did a bit of work behind the scenes, and I believe Elliot Lear has agreed to review this, and Martin Streamling. So we have a number of committed reviewers. I'd like to encourage these people to review this within the next 2 weeks. And with those reviews, I intend to close the working group last call. Please send your reviews to the mailing list so people can see them. And then we'll discuss how to take this forward.
Good plan. Yeah, we try to finish this.
Yeah, the intention is to finish the work. Okay. So the final bit of this chair's wrap-up is the milestones review. We have a number of milestones which we have now marked as done. The yellow milestones are still pending, but we hope that these will be completed very soon. The green milestones stand good. So this is interesting for TSVWG. The milestones appear to reflect the progress of work at the moment. If you're an editor of a draft on this and you think your milestone is going to be extended, please contact the TSVWG chairs. Otherwise, we are happy people. And heads up, last part of this presentation is to note that one ID has been asking for working group adoption. That's the draft on 802.11 mapping to this serve. So we'll be doing that later in the meeting. So if you haven't read this draft, please add it to your reading list. Please have a look at it. We'd love to receive comments and feedback. After that rather long working group chair summary, we can now move on to the drafts. SCTP drafts first. Michael, are you going to tell us about stream schedulers?
Okay, this is about a document which is about a new data chunk. At last part of it is about this. It is important in that sense that the WebRTC working group is waiting for this, and that's why it's on the list of important things for us to finish. So this is the status. We have version 5 of the document out. At least I tried to address all issues I was aware of. I added a description of stream scheduling. So the document is about a new data chunk and stream schedulers. And this new data chunk allows additional schedulers. So the scheduler concept is new, and I have put in 2 figures and a bit of text to explain what these schedulers are about. This was also a comment raised by a couple of people reading the document saying, we don't really understand what you're talking about, so can you have some explanation of that? Yeah, so up to that it was fine, and we submitted the document, and Karen, who's reading the document pretty detailed, has already given some comments, and we have discussed them, and we'll have some more improvements to the document, which are basically cleanups. So Saturday and Sunday there was a hackathon, and we used that to actually get some running code. We started with some, let's say, existing code. It's now running, at least most of the times, and have found a couple of issues in the sense of a couple of things are not clearly described in the document. And one is how whether the idea of the document is to use the TSN field only for doing reliable transfers and not also for reassembly anymore. And there is no statement that the receiver shouldn't actually not look at the TSN to do any kind of reassembly. We want to make that clear. And it's also, now that the sender can use an arbitrary TSN sequence, he can do it in a way that it blows up a receiver. He could do it with the old stack already, but we want to put in a sentence saying, if you do, you should assign the TSNs in a way that a receiver can progress. And we'll provide as an example a method which ensures that. But a sender can do otherwise. We haven't done the statement of how the I-forward TSN chunk is negotiated. We did this in the code, and we figured out we need a sentence for that. We need text that the I-forward TSN is only used when you use iData. If you use normal data chunks, you use forward TSN chunks. And we have an API issue on the receiver side, which wasn't clear. And I think what we want to do is we keep it as simple as possible for now, not allowing an arbitrary flexibility, but to allow that functionality what the WebRTC guides needs. And this keeps things as simple as possible. If you want more, you can add it locally. It's an API issue. Next slide. So what's to do? Address Karen's comments, address the issues we had. Most of them are editorial, so that should be questions of 1 or 2 weeks to address them, and then see if possibly someone else comes up with comments before or during the working group last call. Questions?
When do you expect the document to be ready for working group last call?
We can have it ready in, let's say, 2 weeks.
If that is so, maybe we should ask who's read this document. And
I
the
know
next
that
question-
Karen did.
with Karen included, because I know Karen's comments. And then the next question will be, is anybody going to read this and could provide some comments on it? So my first question is, could you please put your hand in the air or indicate in some way if you've read this or a recent version of this document? Okay. And I know some of the remote participants have. Would you be willing to review the next version of this document? Could you please indicate to me if you're willing to review the next version of this document? Pat? Fred?
I think Randall Jessup agreed to it.
Or we can always have
he
more
is on
people.
I think he is there on the screen. I don't know if I remember that correctly.
Okay.
Randall just saying.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I think he said that in the past. Thank you, Randall.
So, right, I'll just write down the reviewers' names. Fred, Pat, and Randall Jessup. That sounds good. So
And
please
Karen.
prepare a new version.
And Karen will do it.
Yeah, but she didn't volunteer, did she?
Well, she volunteered via email.
Oh, she did.
To me.
Excellent. Well, you have lots of
I think
reviewers.
so. If not, sorry, Karen.
Okay, so that's good. Maybe we'll take the next presentation then.
So I am Lionel Morand from Orange. So I will not pretend to be an SCTP expert. I'm not even sure what is this protocol, but I'm pure client from a protocol point of view because Diameter is running over SCTP, and also from an operator point of view because we need to use it in different environments. So next slide, please. So actually, in the current version of the SCTP spec, we have the section 15 that lists a number of recommended values for SCTP protocol parameters. And this list is commonly used by SCTP stack implementers as a way to identify a set of parameters that can be configured by the network operator. So, and part of this list, and actually it is some feedback that we receive from vendors saying that, for instance, the SAC delay is not taken into account in some implementation, and feedback received from the vendors to say, but it's not supposed to be part of. But actually in the spec there is, so one example here is a code from the spec saying that this is something that needs to be configured, or at least you should be able to configure this parameter. Next slide. Yeah, so we had this discussion maybe internally with different vendors for maybe now 2 years. So I propose to create a draft and to submit the draft and to have a clear discussion here in this group. So the way proposed here is to update the specification to indicate that the SAC delay is a parameter that needs to be configured, and we have also given the recommended value that is already in the spec to say that it should be 200 milliseconds. So why this approach? It's because if you update, you will not obsolete the existing one, but you will have a clear hint for the implementers to know that there is something new. And this kind of clarifications cannot be seen as a errata because there is nothing wrong except that the table in the section 15 is not up to date. Next, please. So we have questions actually. It's, is this approach, so I'm assuming that we're addressing an existing issue because we received internally and also on the mailing list feedback saying that this issue exists. And about updating the draft, I think the specification, I think is the right way to do that. Just to clearly indicate that it is something that needs to be configured. And actually we are clarifying two things in the draft, saying that you have a set of parameters that need to be configured and also the value recommended for this configurable parameters. And so the question raised by Michael was that is there something that needs to be merged in the current SCTP update draft? Actually, I don't know. I don't know what were the triggers to be in, if it was on only a collector of existing errata, for instance, or known issues that was for documented for a while. This one was not present, for instance. And the only thing that we want from an operator point of view is to have something where it is clearly indicated that you need to configure it, whatever the solution. And we don't want to wait for 2 years again. So I don't know what will be the future of this draft SCTP update. So I think it could be in both directions, saying that you could have a standalone one, just updating to say that this information is configurable. And after that, if you have a BIS version, it will capture anyway any updates of the 4960 specification. So if not, if it is something ready, and so on. So now I think it's your turn. So if you have any question or reaction.
Or maybe the first comment is, I think this does fall within the charter of the things we do in this working group. So thank you very much. Michael.
Michael Tuxen. I think this addresses an editorial error in RFC 4960. It's no question. The suggestion I made is that we are working on a document collecting all the editorial things we need to improve in 4960, and we can include that. So it's up to you if you want to get that included. If you agree, I'm happy to take this in. How that document will progress, we will see. I mean, I will ask in a couple of minutes. We're working with adoption for that, and we want to progress that. So at least in the past, it was possible for an operator to say, here, let's have a look. We have 4960, but the IETF is working on an update. It's a working group document. The issue is listed there. So yes, it is something. It worked in the past. And if not, you can also, I mean, if you really, as an operator, need to talk to vendors, and there is also an ETSI specification which tells you which parameters must be configurable, and I think we got it right there. But from my point of view, it's an offer to, if you agree, we can put this into the BIS document and it will come up when it comes up.
I think that, as I said, I just want to ensure that we will have something soon. So I'm not saying that we need it in few months, but I don't want to have something. So I don't know what is the process usually to update 4960. So I don't want to spend 3 years on trying to update an existing protocol and so on. So I don't know what is the ongoing consensus on the update, for instance. That will be discussed anyway after that. But
let me comment on the process and see if Michael's got a comment on my comment. The intention here was to do an informational document that we publish relatively soon that defines the exact text changes to be made to 4960. So in effect, this would be published as an RFC relatively soon as that list is stable. I suggest that that might actually be in the same sort of time frame as publishing any other document in the IETF. It's just an informational document. It doesn't have to go through a huge lot of extra procedures to get that published. The update to 4960 is a little bit more complicated. This is a document that people rely upon. It's a fundamental spec here. So that update will take slightly longer. It will go through more rigorous review, although of course we will already have a change list because we have the informational document. That process will take longer to produce the new replacement for 4960. And it's important that when we think about this, to classify whether the changes we're talking about here are corrections and amendments based on experience or the addition of new features. I think this is a correction based upon experience to the text, and therefore it qualifies well to fit within both of those documents, the immediate informational and the later update, should the group take it.
Yeah, just on this point, it's actually the thing that worry me is the fact that we will rely on informational RFC. So from an IETF point of view, it's okay, you know what it is, and it is something available and you can rely on. When you have a discussion with a vendor, it's different. It's saying that as for the time being, it is not so clear, so we can understand that it is something that may not be configurable. So it was the reason of at least the proposal to update one. But as I said, it's an ongoing discussion. So, Michael, please.
Can you go back a slide? Can you go back a slide? I thought you said you can't file an errata. Is that so? You said you want something soon. You can bring to the vendors. I have no problem in if someone files an errata saying there is a missing line of text in this. I'm not sure if Randy is paying attention right now, but if I would be the guy who was asked if it's okay or not, I would say yes. So then you have an approved errata of an existing document, which should be enough to go to a vendor.
Okay, yeah.
The caveat there being that when we approve that errata, it has to be not a change to the text, simply a correction of language. But
for me, it's a missing line of text. It's an editorial thing. Yeah, Randy agrees. Who is asked for approving the errata? Who has been asked for approving an errata? The AD. So, what the AD of the day?
Send a proposal for an errata, and let's see whether we think that can be approved, because that might be a stepping stone to get an even quicker response.
Okay.
Yep.
In that case, so I would propose to do that, and so I can check with you, Michael, also. And if it is, the errata is fine for us, and we can also add this to the informational draft. So the draft for informational RFC, listing the updates, possible updates.
Yeah, that document contains all currently approved erratas.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I suspect it's Michael again, isn't it? Oh, on the subject of erratas.
Exactly, about this document. Yeah, this is a draft. We started, I don't know, a couple of months ago, collecting. So basically, we have a couple of erratas, not that many, filed for the RFC 4960, but we have from Ericsson a couple of issues with the RFC 4960, which results in interrupt problems. So we decided it might be good to collect the known erratas with the issues which have been reported into a document. So the status is that we have the second version. We have 32 issues dealt with in this document. For each issue, we have a section. It says this is the old text in RFC 4960. This is the proposed new text in for the BIS document, and these are the reasons for the change. So you can go line by line, understand what will be the changes of the document, and understand what the changes are. So this will be once the BIS RFC has been published, you have a list of changes and why they are there. So you can, if you have an RFC 4960 compliant implementation and you want to know if you have the future RFC future number compliant implementation, you can go through the Delta list and see what it is. The document isn't complete. We use an issue tracker on GitHub. If we have new issues, we put it there and discuss there somehow the changes so that you have some history. And we have 18 issues to go. And then, yeah, I mean, 18 issues we know now of, and possibly a couple of them are coming up. I think Maxim had one additional right now.
You just give the list.
Yeah, that's it. So, this is something you did, right?
I pulled that and sent you an email saying I was going to pull it from the GitHub and just put it on the slide.
Okay.
Just so people can see that actually they can pull it as well. This is not a closed process. You can look at what these lists are and go to GitHub and actually find all the little clicky bits that go with it.
Yes. So, and it's nice that you give a presentation you didn't see. Okay, so we can go through this list, but I think that doesn't make any sense because some of them are pretty easy text changes. Some of them are require a deep understanding of the protocol mechanisms, like this issue with action B of table 2 or so. If that's the subject, that means you really have to think about this 3 times at least. Other things are like ICMP, feedback, that kind of stuff. But there's also something like remove hostname parameter, which is we have a single parameter in the S2 specification, which hasn't been tested in an interoperable way right now. So when we have in mind moving from proposed standard to more to another state, we have to remove this. So this is the stuff we will deal with in this document. So to do, yeah, deal with the issues we know of, deal with the issues which come up as discussed. If it's acceptable by you, we can add this issue there. And we think that it might be useful if this is the working group document, which ends up at some point of time in an informational ROC describing the future changes of RFC 4960 in a time frame that we are not talking about years, we are talking about, let's say, this year to finish the document and start the process on that document.
Questions on the talk? Could I have a show of hands of people who have read the list of errata issues, this document here? Who's read this list? 1, 2, 3, 3 and a bit. Okay. The question of working group adoption comes up, and this would be a little bit of a shocker had we not mentioned this on previous working group meetings. And previous working group meetings, we'd also asked how many people were following this and whether this was the correct process. So I'm going to formally call a working group adoption for this document at this meeting. If you think that this is a useful thing for this working group to do, to compile this list of errata, the process is as we sketched out previously in TSVWG meetings. The intention is to document all errata, all corrections to the document, and then to open the document for a BIS revision. If you think this is a thing that TSVWG should do, can you please hum now? Okay, if you think this is a thing that we should not do now in TSVWG for some reason, please hum now. I take that as support for moving forward for working group adoption. We will repeat this on the mailing list to capture the people who are not present in the room.
Okay. Thank you.
Next speaker is going to be you again, or Randall?
Pardon?
Who's going to be the next speaker?
I will talk about SCTP-NET. Yeah, this is about a document which is definitely older than the document about SCTP iData, and it's not completely finished yet. The reason is about priorities we use to assign our cycles to, and they went to the iData document right now. So what is the status of this draft? It's the 8th revision of a document in this working group. It's actually a bit longer. It's actually a bit older because it goes back to a time where we had a Behave working group, and we had a document there and a document here, and it was split and merged, so it has some kind of history. We have a single document now which describes how a NAT implementation for SCTP should look or could look like. And it's technically complete, I think. In the past, there was a wish to do some editorial changes, and these have to be done. So what is this about? Basically, you have NAT and NAPT, so you can change on a packet the IP address or the IP address and port number. And changing the IP address and the port number has a problem for SCTP in case of multi-homing, because all an endpoint is a list of IP addresses, but and has only a single port number. So you can't change the port number independently on multiple paths. So we came up with a way of doing NAT for SCTP, which means we don't change the port number, but which gives you almost the service you get from NAPT. So you can handle 2 nodes behind a NAT, talking to the same server, choosing the same local port number. So you run into a port number collision, but we can resolve this. We do this by a simple idea. We have an association identifier or connection identifier, and we use the source ports, and the port numbers and the verification tag for that. This gives us 46 bits of random data, which is good enough. It's not perfect. We deal with a collision case, but it helps in almost all cases. This means a NAT box does not need to change the packet. The SCTP packet, it can change the IP address, so the IP header, but nothing inside the SCTP packet. And it needs support for inside the NAT box and in the endpoint, so we'll both have to do something. So this is what's still to do. The suggestion for the improvement is we have currently 1 section describing the procedures, and it tells you how this works. And the suggestion was to split it for what has a NAT implementer to do and what has an endpoint implementer to do. So that you don't have to understand everything if you only want to implement the NAT part or if you only want to implement the endpoint part. And this means that we have to move text around, make sure that it's still self-contained if you only read this section. We have lots of examples of message flows in there. We will keep that intertwined because you need to see what an endpoint sends, how it influences the NAT box, and so on. The other point which was brought up in an earlier IETF meeting in a discussion was that we currently use only IPv4. We give concrete examples with IP addresses in the document, and we only translate v4 addresses to v4 addresses, but you can, so this is not, there's no limitation in this procedures that you can't do v6 to v6 translation or v4 to v6 or v6 to v4. So the suggestion was to at least especially mention that you can do v6 to v4 translation or vice versa. So having an example which shows this should be added or can be dealt with. This is basically what needs to be done. Implementation status, I think the middle box stuff is mostly implemented in the FreeBSD net stuff. The endpoint implementation is partly done FreeBSD. So there is some experience with the implementation. That's the status.
quick comment from the chair. Can you make sure that the V6 example appears in a separate subsection so it's really clear to those people who will review the final document?
Okay, we can make that clear, yeah.
Does anybody have any comments on this particular document? There were questions when this document was resurrected about whether it should be continued in the IETF based on the decision to more or less not support new NAT work for V4. But I personally think that this work has been started a long time ago. It started in the Behave Working Group. And my own take on that would be that this document is a product of that process that originated a while ago, and we should continue it. If people want to comment on this, please feel free to do so, but please do it within the working group now so that we have a clear consensus. If you have any concerns about us publishing a NAT document at this time, please say. Okay, I don't have further comments. When will the document be ready? It's on our milestones list.
You had something like September on your list, which sounds doable.
Sounds doable. Okay, that's good.
Not sure if someone will be able to present it in South Korea, but
right. Okay, NAT document done. Tell us about encapsulation and what you want to consider additionally into what you've already considered.
Yeah, so this is about UDP encapsulation. We have an RFC about that. This started as a document for dealing with legacy nets which don't support this fancy algorithm we describe in the other document. On the one hand side, and on the other hand side, how you can deal with SCTP implementations when you don't have access to a raw socket, so you can't send SCTP packets. So these were the two reasons to simply encapsulate SCTP in UDP, and there's an RFC describing that. It's RFC 6951, and to give you a very short way of doing this, is that when you want to encapsulate a packet into a UDP, an SCTP packet into a UDP packet, you basically have to insert the UDP source and destination port numbers. So that's what you have to do. So when I call here encapsulate, what I call here encapsulation behavior means whether I do encapsulation or not. So I can send it over UDP or natively. And if I encapsulate, I must know my own port number and the destination port number. So an SCTP stack has a single own port number. That's the local encapsulation port number. That's configured. That's not the problem. So when I'm sending a packet, I need to figure out, should I send it over UDP or natively? And if I send it over UDP, what is the destination port number? That's the remote encapsulation port. And that RFC is laid out in a way that it just learns what port number is used by the peer. So when the peer sends a packet, that source port number can be translated by NAT boxes. And I just see, oh, my peer uses that port. So whenever I send a packet to him, I use that port number. And that can change over time. And the SCTP stack will just adopt. So whenever it receives a packet, it verifies that it really belongs to the association. And if that check is performed, it updates this remote encapsulation port. And it can also turn on or off encapsulation. So you can start talking encapsulated and switch over to native if you want to. So RFC 6951 states that you must do this update of the behavior after first, when you receive a packet, look up the association, and once you've found it, look up the verification tag you expect and ensure that it's the verification tag you got. This means an off-path attacker can't do any harm. Looks like there's missing a slide here.
What did you want?
There was a slide, the issue, and the issue says two things are missing. One is, what do you do with packets which are out of the blue? Because you can't check. You don't find the association. You can't do this check. And the other question is, what if you receive a packet with an init chunk? Packets with init chunks have the verification tag 0, so you can find the association, but you can't do the verification tag check. That's not mentioned in the RFC. So that's where the solution comes in, which is proposed here. And for out of the blue packets, it's very simple. So if you get a packet and you don't find the association, we call this out of the blue. And if you have to send a response packet, then you just reflect the behavior. So it was received natively, you answer natively. It was received encapsulated over UDP, you respond over UDP and exchange source and destination port. Simple thing. What's not that simple is if packets come in with the init chunk, then you have the verification tag of 0, but you find an association. And nothing is mentioned in the document. What you have to do is you don't update your encapsulation behavior for that association. So if you're running natively, you keep natively. If you're running over UDP, don't change the remote encapsulation port. Then look what the packet you received is. If it's the same encapsulation method, so if you're currently operating natively and it's native, fine. If it's UDP encapsulated, not fine. If you're running over UDP, it's natively, not fine. If you're running over UDP and it isn't UDP, but it has a different port number, it's also not fine. And if it's not fine, you must send an abort and you may include an error message. Only if it's fine, it doesn't change anything, then you send it in a DAG. If you don't do this, an attacker might be able to take over your association because he only has to own the same IP address, but he doesn't have to own the same port number or so. So if you have a userland stack on that node, a different userland stack on the same node can start and can take over that association. So that's why you have to do this stuff done right. And it's just not specified. So it's not wrong what it's in the RFC. The RFC misses this edge case. There is a limitation, and the limitation is if a node sends an init in the middle of an association, the node has restarted. So he wants to continue an association, but for example, crashed in the middle of that. He can't change his UDP encapsulation behavior for that. But that's not a big deal. The whole idea of a restart is to continue the association without any change. So it's just a force. If it was using before a UDP port, it has to bind to the same address and does this. So that's the solution. Here's the error cause. It's a similar behavior we do if an endpoint restarts with a new IP address. We also don't allow this. And here you may put in this error cause telling this was the old encapsulation part, this is the new one. So that's why you get aborted. And there is a may because we also have a may for the IP address, and it's up to the operator to decide if he wants to be open and say what the problem is. It's nice for debugging. If you're an attacker, you get hints why it went wrong and might give you additional information. So some operators might want to switch this up. That's why we have a may there. Yeah. So these slides are so. Did you change these slides?
Yeah, I pushed in the extra slides, so.
Okay.
And then I think
Yeah. Okay. So.
And that was rather late, so I
Okay. So, this is correct, but doesn't fit actually the thing. So, it says what we had two versions of slides.
Yeah.
So
we have a hybrid here.
Yeah. So the question is, we have implemented this in FreeBSD. We have some experience. The whole issue came up while we had some people running userland stacks and running into this issue. So the question is how to progress this this stuff. There are three options. Formally, one is to file an errata on the existing RFC and say, well, here is a missing thing, and here's what you need to do. I don't think we can get this error course in by an errata because of the IANA registry stuff. Plan B would be,
Well, the reason you can't get it in as an errata because it is actually a change.
what?
It's an oversight in the original spec. It's not a
It's okay.
yeah. So it's not an errata.
And just
Yeah.
trying to
It's not because you need an extra IANA
No,
registration.
it's okay.
It's just because you can't do this as
No,
an errata.
I don't care that much about the error course, but so first thing would be an errata. Second would be progress this document in an RFC status, updating the existing one. However, the original document is not that large, and having two RFCs to look at for this is also not the optimal thing. So the third possibility would be to let this document die and just do a BIS of the European CAPS document. I talked to these guys before. What is the best thing? I think no one agreed that the errata thing is okay. It looks like the BIS document for the UDP and CAPS thing is the best way to go. That people, if they want to do this, have a single document to read, and these sentences can easily fit into the things there. So it's a not that complicated change.
Who are the people who refer to the original document? What RFCs and specs rely on the original document that you're now suggesting that you do a BIS for? So the UDP and CAPS doc. This is used by?
None.
No
I
other
think so.
RFCs refer to it.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it doesn't say, even if some documents refer to it, I mean, the service doesn't change.
If you're asking the opinion of the chairs, it would certainly be produce a new version of the document as a BIS document and update it, because nobody wants to read two sets of boilerplate to implement one thing.
Okay. Final format question. This is then the first version is an individual submission, and then
Well, that was a question about how you change it. I mean, the first question is who wants to do this? Is this a thing we should be doing in the working group? Should we be implementing this update?
I think so, and I would be willing to do that.
You'd be willing to do it, and it fixes a security problem, which probably is a good motivation for doing the work. You can submit an individual document. We will then need people to have read that document before we can talk about adoption.
Okay. Thank you.
I need to pretend to be David now. I'm going to stand up. So I'm going to talk about another draft, but I'm fed up of sitting in the chair, so I'm going to stand up. This is the diffserv intercon draft. We're moving on to diffserv rather than the SCTP drafts. And this particular draft was presented in Japan. David presented this wonderful slide with Rudiger Geib. And you should know that this is about connecting internet exchange points to signal diffserv code points between those exchange points and how that relates to the underlying services provided in the network. The idea is to make diffserv at least interoperable between different diffserv domains, that's different operator networks. The acknowledgement in the draft is that not all diffserv fields will necessarily be supported in the different domains, and therefore it talks about what the practical issues are in mapping diffserv from one diffserv domain to the next, with the idea of producing some end-to-end diffserv support. This is an exact copy of the slide presented in Japan. If you want to ask comments on it, I shall try and answer it. I shall not try and explain it. The work on diffserv intercon has been maturing. This particular draft has been stable since Japan. There's been relatively small changes. I'm interested in people who might wish to review this version of the draft because it is coming up for working group last call soon. So the first question I've got is, has anybody read the DiffServ intercon draft recently? Yeah, okay, a few people. Would anybody be willing to read the latest version and check whether this appears to be finished? Fred will? Who are you? Oh yeah, okay, thanks. So we have two people who will read the latest version and see if this is complete and possibly ready for publication. If you want to pass comments on it, please do. Please use the mailing list. Is Gonzalez here? You'll be next.
Okay, thanks, Dory. I've been asked to give a heads up on the Accord buff that is actually quite relevant to the transport area. As a matter of fact, it's a transport buff. So I'm gonna basically summarize a bit what we're gonna discuss there. The idea is not to run the buff here, as you can imagine. So it's just like, so that you guys know if you want to go on Thursday to check it out. So Accord basically is a buff sponsored by Spencer as the transport ID. And the history of this is like, as you know, I mean, we've been seeing a lot of encryption on the internet, and operators are seeing more and more encrypted traffic on their networks. There's several reasons for that. One of them is the IETF basically, moving and encouraging people to encrypt traffic and coming up with protocols that use encryption by default, all of that. But there's actually, many other reasons out there, which basically the end result is like people are seeing a lot of traffic. In particular, mobile operators, they tend to do different things to manage traffic on their radio networks. And some of those techniques, they rely on actually being able to see the traffic. So when a lot of traffic is encrypted, they cannot actually do all those things that they do for operation and management. So, the GSMA is the organization of, the mobile operators. Many of them are there. So they started to analyze, what they could do. And they actually, the IAB ran a workshop with them. The workshop was called Marnew. And the IAB was there, many IETF people was there, but anyway, it was kind of like a, reduced effort. So it wasn't like an IETF-wide thing, like a buff is. There, basically, it was interesting for the operators to explain what they do, because many times it's very different what you can see on a 3GPP architecture, for example, to what is actually deployed, and even to what is actually in use. So that was interesting for people to understand a bit better what is the problem. And now the idea is basically to come here and discuss with the IETF as a whole. What is the actual problem? Understand what are the pain points that they are suffering, things that they need to do and they cannot, and to find basically ways that they allow us to use both encryption and at the same time they can do what they need to do with their networks. As you can see. If you go to the BOF page, this is a non-working group forming BOF. So it is the point actually is not to create an Accord BOF that is going to be working on that. The idea is to understand the requirements, understand the scenarios, and once we do that, there may be solutions that the IETF could develop. If that happens, they will be chartered independently on this BOF. One of the reasons I'm presenting here is that some people thought, for example, that DiffServ could be a solution, one piece of the solution, or the solution space included DiffServ. So if we agreed at some point that DiffServ was actually a useful thing to do and we need to define that, we would obviously come to the right working group and do it there. So as you see, it's a bit of, discussion both, just to understand basically problem space instead of scope. A very well-scoped effort, and then we will take it from there. Actually, depending on the discussions, the understanding we get, we will, decide how to follow. It could be, chartering work in different groups. It could be actually, maybe using existing mechanisms, and that remains to be seen. So I think this is kind of like enough for a heads up. If someone has any questions or clarifications.
Do come to the mic if you would like to ask anything about what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an agenda and a set of drafts or
Yes,
contributions?
yeah, that's a good point, actually. We are uploading everything as we get it, so you can actually go through the drafts, the slides, actually, the agenda. I would suggest that, before doing any of that, you go and fetch the manual report from the IAB and read it, just to understand, what happened in that IAB workshop. Maybe you are not familiar with that, and see basically just for background on what are the discussions, some of the discussions that they happened there. As a matter of fact, I think there were surprising findings. For example, just to name one, people thought that, on the radio networks, they were using like very, very different traffic classes, and that wasn't actually true for real deployment. So you may actually, find a few surprises there if you are not too familiar with how radio networks and cellular technologies work, actually. So my suggestion, go there, read the report, and then have a look at the different drafts, the slides, and if you are interested, please come on Thursday. I'm going to be giving the same heads up basically on the TSB area, because Spencer told me that, while we will have overlap in the attendees here, but basically, it's interesting also for everyone there to understand that.
Okay, so come along on Thursday to the Accord booth. Find out more about how some networks have deployed some things and need to deploy other things.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you everybody for coming to TSBWG. We will have new things coming up in the next meeting on Thursday, but this particular meeting has now closed. You may leave. Has anybody got the blue sheets before you leave? Has anybody not signed the blue sheets? Okay. Have a pleasant time. Come back on Thursday for more TSBWG work. All these drafts progressing through to publish status. Means that all the energy went on preparing drafts, yes. Maybe we could bring that as the agenda terms.